The revelation wasn't just realizing my intuition was right. It was realizing I had been betraying it to survive. I wasn't disconnected. I was self-abandoning because when your safety depends on other people, you learn to silence your inner voice. But real peace doesn't come from ignoring truth. It comes from honoring it.
Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya.
Hey, beautiful souls. Thank you for tuning in today. We're diving into one of the most powerful turning points in your healing journey. One of the biggest parts of my AAA framework, the moment of revelation. You know, the one I'm talking about when your whole world shifts, not because something outside of you changes, but because you finally see the truth. When God opens your eyes to what you were never meant to stay blind to. It's the moment you stop just surviving and start seeing. It's when your body catches up to what your spirit already knew. It's when your nervous system stops lying to keep you safe. Many of us who survived trauma often fear revelation because it means change. It makes us let go of our norm and rebuild from the inside out. Yes, that's the work. It makes us face the things we've seen. It makes us face the things we've been suppressing and ignoring. Hey, soul sister. Before we dive in, make sure you followed and subscribed to this podcast so you never miss the next drop of healing energy. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment or some feedback. Let me know what's been resonating with you and what topics you want me to cover in future episodes. Your voice helps me shape this space for our community. Also, if something in this episode speaks to your spirit, share it with a friend, a sister, or anyone who's walking their own healing journey. Because together, we're not just healing, we're evolving, expanding, and reclaiming our power. Now, let's get into today's episode. So before we deep dive, I just want to pause here for a moment because I need to introduce to you something that completely changed the way I understand healing, and that's the idea of the dimensions of consciousness. Now, before your mind goes anywhere mystical and overwhelming, I want to ground this. When I talk about dimensions, I'm not talking about floating out of your body or anything abstract or unreachable. I'm talking about levels of awareness. Different ways we experience ourselves, our lives, and the world around us. As we grow, heal, and evolve, think of it as much of the truth you're able to see at any given point. Because healing isn't just about what happens to you, it's about how you perceive it. For most of my life, I thought healing meant fixing what was broken, fixing relationships, fixing the patterns, fixing myself. But what I've learned is that healing is less about fixing. It's more about seeing why you chose what you chose, seeing what shaped you, seeing the beliefs that were operating quietly in the background while you were just trying to survive. The dimensions of consciousness gave me language for something I had already been living, but didn't yet understand. They helped me realize that I wasn't stuck. I was simply operating from a level of awareness that made sense for the pain I was carrying. And as your awareness expands, your choices change as well. Not because you force them to, but because you literally can't unsee what you now know. That's what revelation really is. It's not a dramatic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's a gradual shift in perception where what once felt normal starts to feel misaligned. And that shift is sacred. Each dimension represents a different relationship to fear, safety, identity, and truth. You don't just jump between them overnight. You move through them as your nervous system softens, as your heart opens, and as your spirit feels safe enough to tell the truth. And here's the most important thing I want you to hear before we move on. There is no better or worse dimension. There is no level you're supposed to rush toward. Each one serves a purpose. Survival serves a purpose. Awakening serves a purpose. And alignment serves a purpose. The problem isn't being in a certain dimension. The problem is staying there once your soul is ready for more. When I learned about these dimensions, something inside me relaxed. I stopped judging myself for what I hadn't outgrown yet. I stopped shaming my past choices. I stopped asking, what's wrong with me? And I started asking, what level of awareness was I when I made that decision? And that question changed everything. So as I walk you through these dimensions, I want you to listen gently, not to diagnose yourself, not to label where you are, but to notice what resonates. Because if something lands in your body, it's not because you're behind, it's because you're ready. And that's where the healing begins. Now, let's break it down. So the 3D, which the third dimension, I also call it the survival mode. This is where most of us start. It's the space of fear, ego, and control. You're living in reaction. You're living in performance. You're living in proof mode. And I lived there for a long, long time. In relationships, I thought love meant struggle. I held on to toxic relationships because that was my norm. That's what I grew up seeing. Women who poured into men that didn't deserve them. Women who accepted infidelity, manipulation, and pain because they believed being chosen, even by the wrong man, was better than being alone. But don't get it twisted. I then also saw men like my grandfather be mistreated like a servant, in which my grandmother was controlling, cold, and ungrateful, while he continued to love and pour and provide for her. Then on the other side of my family, I saw a grandmother being the servant, a woman brought to a new country, stripped of her name, her culture, and treated like she was lucky just to be here. And then my own mother, a woman who poured and poured until she had nothing left. Seeing this as a child, I decided that love is something you earn. And because of that, I was the caterer in my relationship, and I attracted men that wanted to be served, not serve. There's a difference. For the longest time, I thought this was a cultural thing, being a Hispanic woman, where the woman normally prepares her husband's food, does the laundry, cleans the house, takes care of the children. So that's what I did to men who were nothing like my grandfather, who actually deserved to be treated as such. My blueprint of love was confusing mix of sacrifice and suffering. I thought love meant proving my loyalty through pain. So that's what I repeated. I tolerated physical, verbal, emotional abuse for years in several relationships, not just one. In one of my relationships, I was a provider while he couldn't keep a job. Yet he went out and cheated on me left and right. He was abusive. I tell myself he'll change. He's just struggling. He loves me. He just doesn't know how to show it. All those things, right? In another relationship, I wasn't the provider, but I was the caterer, and he was a full-blown narcissist who never cheated but was very abusive, violated me, and he almost killed me. Yet I still stayed. Through the abuse, the cheating, the manipulation, love bombing, and gaslighting, I saw what love wasn't. And I realized if I stayed, I wasn't teaching my daughters love. I was teaching them survival. I had to ask myself what I would do if I knew my daughters were being treated like this. What would I do if my daughters didn't know what love is supposed to feel and be like? That was my first crack of revelation. And the same survival pattern showed up in my career too. And no one really talks about how lonely leadership can be, especially when you're a minority young woman. Because from the outside, it looks like you made it. You got the title, the responsibility, the authority. But inside, you're often standing alone. I was leading rooms full of men who didn't see me as their equal. Some were older, some were retired military, some had already decided who I was before I even spoke. And the loneliness wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle. It was a silence when I raised a concern and it was ignored until a man repeated it and suddenly it was a great idea. It was a double standard of being called strong, but never being supported. It was knowing that if I failed, I wouldn't just represent myself, I'd confirm every stereotype attached to me. So what did I do? I carried more, I prepared more, I performed more. Because when you're a minority woman in leadership, you're not just doing the job. You're defending your right to even be there. And the hardest part wasn't the workload. It was the absence of safety. There was no room to be unsure, no space to be mentored, no margin to be human. I couldn't say I'm overwhelmed because I feared it would be interpreted as weakness. I couldn't ask for grace because I wasn't sure if it would be given. So I learned to self-soothe with achievement, to fill the emptiness with accomplishment, to let productivity replace connection. And that's a quiet kind of loneliness that no one talks about. Then, somewhere along the way, I became more masculine. Not because I wanted to, but because that's what survival required. I learned very quickly that if I spoke gently, I wasn't heard. If I paused before answering, I was questioned. If I showed empathy, it was mistaken for uncertainty. So what did I do? I adapted. I sharpened my voice. I came with receipts. I overprepared. I learned to speak in facts instead of feelings because facts were safer. Softness was not rewarded in those rooms. Softness wasn't rewarded in those rooms. Confidence was. Certainty was. Control was. And the truth is, I didn't become that way because I wanted power. I became that way because I wanted safety. I learned to armor myself with competence, to lead with logic instead of intuition, to keep my emotions locked away where no one could use them against me. That's the 3D life where worth is built on performance and validation comes from proving people wrong. And it works until it doesn't, until your soul gets tired of surviving. Hey, sis. If you've been asking yourself, where do I even start with my healing journey? I created something just for you. Take my healer archetype quiz and discover what kind of healer you truly are. Whether you're the sacred nurturer, the soul connector, the creative soul, or the intuitive reclaimer, this quiz will help you understand the best way to approach your healing journey so you can move forward with clarity, confidence, and alignment. Take the quiz now by clicking in the link in the show notes. It's free. What are you waiting for? Then comes the fourth dimension, which I call the awakening. This is the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. And it's messy, y'all. But it's also very holy. This is where God starts to strip away what you thought was you. The job title, the relationship, the habits, the labels, the authority. And this dimension, he starts revealing the truth, the patterns, the wounds, the reasons behind your choices. And it hurts. It's another grief no one prepares you for. You're grieving the woman you thought you'd become, not because she was wrong, but because she was shaped by survival. I had an image of myself once. Strong, unshakable, independent, the woman who didn't need anyone, the woman who could endure anything and keep going. She was praised, she was admired, and she was called resilient. And for a long time, I was proud of her. But awakening asked me a question that I wasn't ready for. And that was, who are you without the armor? Because the woman I thought I'd be was built in response to pain. She learned to be hyper capable because she couldn't rely on support. She learned to stay guarded because vulnerability wasn't safe. She learned to keep producing because rest felt like risk. And letting her go felt like betrayal. It felt like abandoning the version of me who survived when no one else could. I grieved her discipline, her grit, her ability to carry the uncarryable. But I also had to tell the truth. She was tired. She was holding her breath through life. She was mistaking endurance for her destiny. And the hardest part of that grief was realizing who I needed to become next looked nothing like who I'd been praised for being. Healing didn't ask me to be stronger. It asked me to be softer. It didn't ask me to push through. It asked me to feel. And that terrified me because softness meant slowing down. And slowing down meant I might finally feel everything I've been suppressing. So I mourned the woman who could survive anything but didn't know how to receive. I mourned the version of myself who equated love with loyalty to pain, who equated leadership with self-sacrifice, who equated worth with output. And here's the truth no one tells you. You can love who you were and still release who you're no longer meant to be. Grief doesn't mean you failed her. It means you've outgrown her. I remember asking God, why are you taking everything from me? Why is all this happening? And he said, I'm not taking anything. I'm making room for peace. And that was the beginning of refinement. This was where I learned that endings are not punishment. They're preparation. The 4D is when your heart breaks open so your spirit can breathe again. You cry, you release, you rest. You start to unlearn everything survival taught you. And somewhere in the process, your vision clears. You stop seeing through pain and start seeing through purpose. Then comes the 5th dimension. I call this the space of alignment. And this is where peace lives, where you're no longer hustling for your worth, where you work from peace instead of for peace. When you lived in survival for a long time, your nervous system gets used to chaos. It learns to scan for danger. It learns to stay alert. It learns that calm means something bad must be coming. So when peace finally arrives, your body doesn't recognize it as safety. It recognizes it as unfamiliar. I remember moments where everything was quiet. No conflict, no urgency, no fires to put out. And instead of feeling relief, I felt uneasy, like as if I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. My mind would whisper, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you fixing something? Why does this feel empty? But it wasn't empty. It was regulated. It was my nervous system detoxing from adrenaline, from hypervigilance, from years of bracing for impact. Peace felt boring. And that scared me. Because when you've been conditioned to survive, intensity feels like aliveness, and calm feels like loss of control. I had to learn that peace isn't passive. It's powerful. Peace doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means nothing is attacking you. And that adjustment, it takes time. Your body needs repetition to learn safety. Your spirit needs permission to rest without guilt. And your mind needs reassurance. And your mind needs reassurance that stillness is not stagnation. I had to stop labeling my discomfort as a sign that something was wrong and start seeing it as a sign that something was healing. Because peace will challenge you, not with pain, but with presence. It will ask you to sit with yourself without distractions, without drama, and without proving. And that can feel confronting when your identity was built on endurance. In 5D, your nervous system is finally calm. You no longer chase what drains you, you attract what aligns with you. You don't force, you flow. You don't perform, you become. There is a difference. This is a dimension where your revelation takes root and where you don't just know truth, you embody it. When you can finally say, I don't need to prove my strength anymore. My peace is proof enough. That's the 5D, and that's where freedom lives. So what is the moment of revelation? For me, it came when I finally saw the truth that I wasn't cursed, lucky, or unlovable. I was simply conditioned. Conditioned to believe chaos was love. Conditioned to believe leadership meant suppression. Conditioned to believe survival was strength. But when I surrendered those lies, I started to see the divine pattern underneath all the pain. God was never punishing me. He was positioning me. And He's doing the same for you. Now, I want to speak directly to you. To the woman who's tired of pretending she's fine. To the one who feels God pulling her away from everything familiar, but she's scared to let go. To the one who keeps hearing that small whisper that says, this isn't it anymore. That's revelation calling your name. My revelation came when I realized my intuition had always been right. There was a moment in my healing when something clicked, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. I realized my intuition had been right all along. Every time I ignored it, it wasn't because it was wrong. It was because I was afraid of what it was asking me to face. I thought I had trust issues. I thought I was too sensitive, too emotional, and too much. But the truth was, I was deeply intuitive. And I had been taught not to trust that. From a young age, my knowing was questioned, dismissed, and overwritten. So I learned to doubt myself. I learned to talk myself out of what I felt, to give people the benefit of the doubt at the expense of my own clarity. I felt it when something was off, but I stayed. I sensed misalignment, but I overrode it with logic. I noticed red flags, but I called them challenges. And every time I did that, I told myself a story. Be patient. Don't overreact. Maybe you're projecting. Until one day, I looked back and every moment that broke me was a moment I had already felt coming. My body knew before my mind was ready. The tight chest, the heaviness, the quiet inner no, that wasn't fear. That was wisdom. And the revelation wasn't just realizing my intuition was right. It was realizing I had been betraying it to survive. I wasn't disconnected. I was self-abandoning. Because when your safety depends on other people, you learn to silence your inner voice to maintain peace on the outside. But real peace doesn't come from ignoring truth. It comes from honoring it. And the day I stopped gaslighting my own intuition was the day my healing accelerated. Not because everything became easy, but because everything became honest. I stopped asking, what's wrong with me? And I started asking, what have I been knowing all along? And maybe that's where you are too. Because if you're listening to this episode, there's a good chance you already know. You felt the discomfort, the misalignment, the quiet nudge that says, this isn't it anymore. That's not confusion, sis. That's revelation knocking. And that's what brings us to the next part of this episode. Recognizing your own moment of revelation. Because before healing becomes action, It always begins with awareness. Revelation begins with honesty, not judgment, pure honesty. It's saying, yes, that was me, but it doesn't have to be anymore. But when I realized how many of my choices were based on old wounds, I felt guilt at first. But then God reminded me awareness is redemption. You can't heal what you keep hiding. So ask yourself, where in my life am I reacting from fear instead of faith? Ask yourself, what am I calling love that's actually just my trauma feeling familiar? Ask yourself, what environments am I staying in out of habit instead of alignment? And know you can't transform what you won't confront. Every revelation has a breaking point. That moment where your soul says, no more, and says, that's not weakness. That's awakening. When I realized that my armor, the overachieving, the independence, the control, was actually protection from pain, I had to let it fall. And it's ugly. I cried, I raged, I resisted. But in the silence after the breakdown came peace. Because revelation doesn't just show you what's broken, it shows you what's ready to heal. And revelation does not mean you fix it all overnight. That's impossible. It means you stop running from it. It's the willingness to trust that God knows what He's doing. Even when it looks like He's wrecking your life, you have to keep your faith. Your mind will say, what if I lose everything? And God will say, what if I'm replacing it with peace? You don't need to chase closure. You just need to stay open to clarity. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And that's how transformation begins. There's no going back. Now let's take a moment to reflect and do some journaling. Take a few deep breaths with me. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Again, inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Reflect on these prompts. You can come back to this later if you can't focus, or write them down and do some reflecting when you have alone time. First one, where did I once confuse chaos with love or safety? What has God been trying to show me that I keep ignoring or excusing? What feels heavy right now? And is that heaviness actually my cue to let go? Where is peace trying to find me? And what am I still clinging to that blocks it? And remember, revelation isn't rushed, it's revealed. Now let's seal this moment with truth with the following affirmations. I highly suggest you write these down if they resonate and hang them somewhere you can see daily. Read them out loud. Affirmations are so powerful, especially when we're trying to reprogram our mind and perspectives. So first one, I'm going to repeat these twice for you. I am open to seeing truth, even when it challenges what I've known. I release the illusion of control and trust divine alignment. I release the illusion of control and trust divine alignment. My old patterns were teachers, not punishments. My old patterns were teachers, not punishments. I no longer chase clarity. I live in it. I no longer chase clarity. I live in it. Last one. Peace is my new normal. Peace is my new normal. Let these become your new language. And remember, if you've been conditioned, it's time to reprogram your inner thoughts and perspectives. And affirmations hold so much power in doing so, especially when you read them, write them, and say them with meaning. And lastly, I just want to close with a quick guided meditation. So if it's safe to do so, begin to bring your attention to your breath. Close your eyes if you can. You don't have to change your breath. Just notice it. Notice the inhale and the exhale. Now, gently invite your breath to slow. Inhale through your nose and release through your mouth. Again, inhale through your nose and soft exhale through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw relax. Twist your neck if you need to release tension, to relax. Allow your body to be held by whatever is supporting you right now. There is nowhere else you need to be, nothing you need to accomplish. This moment, right here, right now, is enough. Place one hand over your heart and one hand over your lower belly. Feel the warmth between your palms. This is your body. This is where truth lives. As you breathe, imagine creating space inside yourself. Space to receive, space to release. Now bring to mind the idea of revelation, not as something sudden or overwhelming, but as a gentle seeing, a quiet knowing. Let yourself remember moments when clarity arrived, not through force, but through honesty. Notice what comes up in your body as you do. If there is tightness, simply acknowledge it. If there is emotion, allow it to flow. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Now bring awareness to the version of you who lived in survival. The one who stayed strong, the one who endured, the one who learned to brace. Silently offer gratitude to that version of yourself. She did what she needed to do, and now gently imagine releasing the armor she carried. You don't have to rip it off. Just loosen it a bit. Allow the breath to move into places that once felt guarded. Now notice what it feels like to rest without anticipation, without waiting for something to go wrong. If peace feels unfamiliar, that's okay. Let yourself sit in the unfamiliar. Peace doesn't need to be exciting. It doesn't need to be intense. It only needs to be present. Notice any urge to fill the silence, to fix, to move, to distract. And instead, practice staying. Staying with your breath. Staying with your body. Staying with yourself. Now bring your attention to your intuition. The quiet signals, the sensations, the inner knowing that's always been there. Remember moments when you felt something wasn't right and how your body knew before your mind caught up. Let yourself feel the truth of this. Your intuition has always been guiding you. You were never disconnected. You were adapting. Take a slow breath in. As you exhale, release any self-doubt you've been carrying. Now, imagine yourself moving forward from this place, not rushing, not proving, not forcing, just aligned. See yourself making